I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching Olivia meticulously pack her suitcase. At 35, as a high school physics teacher, I still couldn't help but admire her timeless beauty, her chestnut hair shimmering in the morning sunlight and her hazel eyes sparkling with anticipation. Even after 10 years of marriage, she had an uncanny ability to make my heart race. "Are you certain you have everything you need for the conference?" I asked, leaning casually against the door frame. Olivia glanced up, a warm smile playing on her lips. "I believe so. 5 days in Chicago, I want to be prepared for anything." I nodded, noticing the delicate lingerie she was carefully folding and placing into her suitcase. It was part of the set I had gifted her for our anniversary just last month. A surge of affection washed over me, knowing she chose to include it even on a business trip. "Using the special occasion items, I see," I remarked with a teasing smile. Her cheeks flushed slightly. "You never know, you might have a fancy dinner or something." As she continued packing, I couldn't help but notice the extra effort she was putting into her appearance. She had spent an additional 20 minutes on her makeup this morning, something she typically reserved for date nights. Her hair was styled in loose waves, a stark contrast to her usual practical ponytail for work. "Going all out for this conference?" I observed, raising an eyebrow. Olivia shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "There must be some important people attending. I just want to make a good impression." She spritzed herself with the expensive perfume I had included with the lingerie. The familiar scent of jasmine and vanilla filled the room, evoking countless intimate moments we had shared. As she zipped up her suitcase, a fleeting sense of unease washed over me, but I quickly dismissed it. This was Olivia, my wife, my best friend, the woman I trusted above all others. "All set?" I asked, forcing a smile. Olivia nodded, wheeling her suitcase to the door. "I think so. I'll call you every night, I promise." She leaned in, pressing her lips to mine in a lingering kiss that left me slightly breathless. Her fingers gently traced my jaw as she pulled away. "I'll miss you." "I'll miss you too," I replied. "Have a great time. Don't forget to bring me back a souvenir." Olivia laughed, the sound light and melodic. "Of course. Love you." "Love you too," I called as she descended the stairs. I watched from the window as she loaded her suitcase into the car and drove away, waving as she turned the corner. Once she was out of sight, the house felt unusually empty. Shaking off the melancholy, I headed to the kitchen to brew some coffee before tackling the pile of papers I needed to grade. Just as I settled at the dining room table with a stack of physics exams, my phone buzzed with an incoming text. Expecting Olivia to confirm her safe arrival at the airport, I was taken aback to see an unknown number on the screen. My brow furrowed as I read the cryptic message, "Your wife isn't who you think she is. Check the guest list for the Hamilton Hotel." A chill ran down my spine despite the warm spring day. Who would send such a message, and why? My first instinct was to delete it and forget I'd ever seen it. It must be some sort of prank or scam. But a nagging doubt began to take root in the back of my mind, whispering that maybe, just maybe, there was something to this. Setting my phone aside, I tried to focus on grading, but the message lingered in my thoughts. After reading the same question 3 times without fully processing it, I pushed the exams aside with a frustrated sigh. "This is ridiculous," I muttered. "I trust Olivia completely." Yet, even as I spoke, I found myself reaching for my laptop. It wouldn't hurt to check right then, maybe I could put this to rest and return to work with a clear conscience. I navigated to the Hamilton Hotel's website in Chicago, scrolling through information about their conference facilities. There was a form to verify event registrations, which I filled out with slightly trembling fingers. Conference name, Chicago Educators Summit, attendee, Olivia Miller. I hit submit and waited, my heart pounding. When the results loaded, I felt like the air had been sucked from my lungs. "No attendees found matching your search." "That can't be right," I said aloud, as if voicing the words could make them true. I tried again, checking my spelling, still nothing. Unease grew within me. Opening our shared digital calendar on my phone, I scrolled to the current week. Olivia's conference was clearly marked for the next 5 days, but there was something else, an event labeled, R&J's Special Project. My stomach twisted into knots. The event was scheduled for the exact dates of the supposed conference. The initials tugged at my memory. Suddenly, it clicked. Ryan Jenkins, the new art teacher Olivia had been spending a lot of time with lately. They were collaborating on some sort of cross-curricular fitness and art program for the school. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. Reflecting on the past few months, I noticed small details I had previously dismissed but now took on new significance. Olivia staying late at school several nights a week, claiming she was grading projects, the new clothes she had bought recently, form-fitting dresses and blouses I had admired but found a bit out of character for my usually practical wife, the way she had become more protective of her phone, angling the screen away when texting. "No," I said firmly, shaking my head. "I'm just letting my imagination run wild. There has to be a reasonable explanation for all of this." But doubt had taken hold, spreading tendrils of suspicion through my mind almost against my will. I found myself walking to Olivia's home office. I told myself I was merely looking for the conference itinerary, surely she had left a copy somewhere. I rifled through the papers on her desk, finding nothing but student artwork and lesson plans. Opening drawers yielded similar results. I was about to give up when I noticed a thick art textbook on the bookshelf, with a scrap of paper sticking out slightly. My heart pounding, I pulled the book from the shelf and a folded note fluttered to the floor. Opening it with trembling hands, I immediately recognized Ryan's messy scrawl. "Can't wait for our special getaway. You're my muse and my passion." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I sank to the floor, clutching the damning note as my world crumbled around me. How could Olivia do this? 10 years of marriage, building a life together, and she'd thrown it all away for a fling with a handsome new teacher. I wasn't sure how long I sat there, overwhelmed by shocking grief. Eventually, the initial wave of emotion subsided enough for me to think somewhat rationally again. I needed more information before confronting Olivia. I had to be absolutely certain. Wiping my eyes, I returned to my laptop. I pulled up Ryan's social media profiles, scrolling through recent posts. My heart sank as I saw a status update from just yesterday, heading out for a rejuvenating beach retreat. Time to recharge and find new inspiration. #Paradise Resort. Paradise was a luxury hotel about 3 hours' drive from our small town. I had always wanted to take Olivia there for a romantic weekend, but we'd never quite been able to afford it on teacher salaries. Apparently, Ryan had deeper pockets, or perhaps they were splitting the cost of their illicit rendezvous. A quick search showed me that Ryan's wife, Emma, had posted about visiting her sick mother out of state for the week. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. My hand shook as I picked up my phone. I needed help, someone to talk me through this nightmare and help me decide what to do next. Without conscious thought, I found myself dialing a familiar number. "Ethan. What's up?" Emily Chen's voice was warm and concerned. She was a former student turned close friend, and Emily had a knack for reading people. She knew something was wrong just from my tone. "Emily, I need your help," I managed, my voice breaking. "Can you come over?" There was only a moment's hesitation before Emily replied, "Of course. I'll be there in 10 minutes." True to her word, Emily arrived shortly after, letting herself in with the spare key I had given her years ago. She found me sitting at the dining room table, staring blankly at the scattered evidence of Olivia's betrayal. Emily took in the scene quickly, her investigator's mind piecing together the situation. She sat down across from me, reaching out to gently squeeze my hand. "Tell me everything," she said softly. I did. My voice hollow as I recounted the events of the morning. Emily listened without interrupting, her expression growing increasingly troubled as I finished speaking. She was quiet for a long moment before taking a deep breath. "Ethan, I'm so sorry, but I have to tell you something. I've suspected this was happening for weeks now." My head snapped up, shock and hurt flashing across my face. "What? Why didn't you say anything?" Emily held up her hands placatingly. "I wasn't sure, Ethan. I saw Olivia and Ryan having what looked like an intimate conversation at a local cafe a while back, but I told myself I was reading too much into it. They worked together after all, and I didn't want to cause problems in your marriage over what might have been nothing." I nodded slowly, the hurt fading from my eyes. I knew Emily would never intentionally keep something like this from me without a good reason. So, what do we do now? I asked, feeling lost. Emily's eyes took on a determined glint. Now we confirm it beyond any doubt. I have some resources through work that can help us track Olivia's phone location. If she's really at this paradise resort with Ryan, we'll know for sure. I hesitated, uncomfortable with the idea of invading Olivia's privacy so blatantly, but the memory of her lies steeled my resolve. I nodded for Emily to proceed. It took only a few minutes for Emily to pull up the information on her tablet. She turned the screen so I could see the blinking dot clearly marking Olivia's location at the Paradise Resort. What now? I asked, my voice hollow. Emily met my gaze steadily. Now we confront them. But you shouldn't do this alone. Let me come with you for support and safety, I responded. I began to protest, but Emily cut me off. I'm not taking no for an answer on this. You're in no state to drive anyway. We'll book a room under my name so they don't see you coming. Then you can decide exactly how you want to handle the confrontation. As Emily made the arrangements, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The initial shock and pain were still there but muted beneath a steely determination. Olivia and Ryan thought they could deceive me, I'd show them just how wrong they were. I know how I want to handle this, I said as Emily made the call to the resort. She raised an eyebrow questioningly. My way. I replied, a hint of my old confidence returning, yes, my way. And I'm going to need your help setting something up before we go. Emily nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Whatever you need, Ethan. Let's make them regret ever betraying you. As we gathered what we needed and headed out to Emily's car, I felt a mix of emotions swirling within me, anger, hurt, and betrayal tempered with a grim satisfaction as my plan took shape in my mind. One thing was certain, by the time this confrontation was over, Olivia and Ryan would wish they had never even considered their little special getaway. Before leaving, I secretly set up a live stream link to the school's social media account on my phone, planning ahead for the confrontation. I wasn't sure yet how I would use it, but I wanted to be prepared for any possibility. As we drove toward the Paradise Resort, my mind raced with possibilities. How would Olivia react when she saw me? What excuses would she try to make? And most importantly, how would I ensure that she and Ryan faced the full consequences of their actions? The answers to these questions awaited us at the luxurious beachfront resort, where my wife thought she was safe from discovery. My jaw clenched as I stared out the window, watching the scenery blur by. Soon, very soon, I would have my answers and my revenge. The afternoon sun hung low in the sky as Emily and I pulled into the elegant circular driveway of the Paradise Resort. The sprawling beachfront property exuded luxury with its pristine white facade and meticulously manicured gardens. Under different circumstances, I might have marveled at the beauty of the place, but now it only served as a painful reminder of Olivia's betrayal. Emily squeezed my arm reassuringly as we stepped out of the car. Remember, she whispered, we're just a normal couple here for a relaxing weekend. No need to draw attention to ourselves. I nodded, forcing a pleasant expression onto my face. I'd had plenty of practice hiding my true feelings over the past 24 hours. What was one more deception in a sea of lies? As we approached the reception desk, Emily effortlessly slipped into her role. She laughed and flirted with the concierge, spinning a tale of a much-needed romantic getaway. I played along, my arm around Emily's waist, trying to ignore the twisting in my gut. And here are your key cards, Mr. and Mrs. Chen, the concierge said with a polite smile. You're in room 816. I hope you enjoy your stay with us. Thank you so much, Emily replied warmly. I'm sure we will. As we made our way to the elevator, my heart began to race. We were so close now, just a few more minutes, and I would be face to face with Olivia and her lover. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. Emily squeezed my hand gently. You got this, Ethan. I'm right here with you. The elevator dinged, and we stepped out onto the 7th floor. The plush carpet muffled our footsteps as we walked down the hallway. My eyes darted from door to door, searching for room 818, where I knew Olivia and Ryan were staying. As we approached our own room, I froze. Voices drifted from the next room, voices I recognized all too well. "Oh, Ryan," Olivia's breathy laugh sent daggers through my heart. "Tonight is going to be our most passionate yet. I can't wait to show you what I brought." "I bet it's that little red number," Ryan's deep voice replied. "The one that drives me wild." "God, Olivia, you're insatiable," Olivia purred. "Poor Ethan has no idea what he's missing out on sometimes. I can't believe how oblivious he is." White-hot rage flooded through me at those words. How dare they mock me like this? My hands clenched into fists at my sides as I fought the urge to burst into their room right then and there. Emily placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. "Stick to the plan," she whispered. "We've got them dead to rights now." I nodded jerkily, allowing Emily to guide me into their room. I paced back and forth as Emily quickly set up her recording equipment, positioning a small camera to capture the hallway and the door to Olivia and Ryan's room. "Okay, Emily," she said, double-checking the angle. "We're all set. How do you want to play this?" I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. "I want to knock on their door. When Olivia answers, I want you to start recording. Can you do it on your phone so it's not obvious?" Emily nodded, pulling out her smartphone. "Consider it done. Are you ready for this as I'll ever be?" I replied grimly, "Yes." We stepped out into the hallway. Emily positioned herself slightly behind me, her phone held casually at her side. I raised my hand and knocked firmly on the door to room 818. There was a moment of muffled confusion from inside, then footsteps approached. I steeled myself as the door swung open. Olivia stood there in a silky robe, her hair tousled and cheeks flushed. Her eyes widened in shock as she saw me. "Ethan," she stammered. "What are you doing here?" "Surprised, darling," I said, my voice deceptively calm. "I thought I'd join you at this teacher conference." Olivia's face drained of color as Ryan appeared in the doorway, equally stunned. "Ethan, I can explain," Olivia began, but I cut her off with a raised hand. "Oh, I'm sure you can," I said coolly. "I'm very interested to hear how you explain being here with Ryan when you're supposed to be at a conference in Chicago." Olivia and Ryan exchanged panicked glances, clearly trying to craft a story. I almost laughed at how quickly their lies unraveled. "It's not what it looks like," Ryan tried, but his voice lacked conviction. "Really?" I arched an eyebrow. "Because it looks like my wife is having an affair with a coworker. Please enlighten me as to what's really going on here." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, please, can we talk about this privately?" "Why?" I asked, my tone deceptively mild. "You didn't seem too concerned about privacy when you were mocking me a few minutes ago. What was it you said? That I'm oblivious to what I'm missing out on?" Olivia paled, realizing they'd been overheard. Ryan stepped forward, attempting to appear authoritative despite being clad only in boxer shorts. "Look, Ethan, this is a private matter." "A private matter?" I interrupted, my voice rising slightly. "I think you've lost the right to privacy when you decided to sleep with my wife." People began to peer out of their rooms, drawn by the commotion. Emily stepped forward, placing a calming hand on my arm. "Maybe we should take this inside," she suggested quietly. I nodded, pushing past Olivia and Ryan into their room. Emily followed, closing the door behind us. "Who's she?" Olivia demanded, her shock turning to indignation. "This is Emily." I replied calmly, "My friend and witness to your infidelity." Ryan sputtered, "What the hell are you playing at, Miller?" I ignored him, turning to my suitcase. I unzipped it calmly and began removing clothes, laying them neatly on the bed. "What are you doing?" Olivia asked, her voice trembling. "Unpacking," I replied matter-of-factly. "I've booked the adjoining room for the week. I hope you don't mind if I join your little getaway." "You can't do that," Ryan protested. "This is our room." I fixed him with a steely gaze. "Actually, I can. This room is registered under my name and paid for with my credit card. You're welcome to leave if you're uncomfortable." Olivia and Ryan exchanged helpless glances. Their romantic retreat was crumbling around them. "Ethan, please," Olivia pleaded, "let's just talk about this. There's no need to involve anyone else." "We're involving Emma," I replied coldly. "The moment you decided to sleep with her husband." The next morning dawned bright and clear, the cheerful sunshine a stark contrast to the tension simmering in rooms 816 and 818. I had barely slept, my mind racing with plans and possibilities. I had spent most of the night coordinating with Emily, setting up the next phase of our confrontation. At precisely 9 a.m., I knocked on the adjoining door. When there was no answer, I used my key card to enter. Olivia and Ryan were huddled together on the bed, looking as though they hadn't slept much either. They jumped when I entered, followed closely by Emily. "Good morning," I said pleasantly. "I hope you slept well." "What are you talking about?" Ryan demanded, his bravado from the previous night noticeably diminished. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "We need to have a little chat with Emma. I think she deserves to know what's been going on. Don't you?" The color drained from Ryan's face. "Emma? My wife? You can't." "I can and I will." I interrupted, "In fact, I've already arranged it. She'll be video calling in about 5 minutes. Olivia burst into tears. "Ethan, please don't do this. We can work this out between us. There's no need to involve anyone else." "You're involving Emma," I replied coldly. "The moment you decided to sleep with her husband." The next 5 minutes passed in intense silence as Olivia and Ryan whispered furiously to each other, trying to devise a plan. Meanwhile, I calmly set up Emily's laptop for the video call. At 9:05 on the dot, the laptop chimed with an incoming call. I answered, and Emma's confused face appeared on the screen. "Ethan," she said, peering at the camera. "What's going on? Is everything okay?" "Hello, Emma," I replied gently. "I'm afraid I have some difficult news to share with you. Ryan and Olivia are here with me." I turned the laptop so Emma could see the guilty couple huddled on the bed. Her confusion quickly turned to shock and then anguish. "What?" she whispered. "Ryan," she whispered. "What? What are you doing here? You said you were at a training seminar." Ryan opened his mouth, but no words came out. Olivia buried her face in her hands, unable to meet Emma's gaze. I explained the situation, detailing the affair, the deception, and the so-called teachers' conference that was actually a romantic getaway. Emma listened in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face. When I finished, she turned her attention to Ryan. "How could you?" she choked out. "After everything we've been through, I trusted you." Ryan stammered out weak excuses and apologies, but Emma cut him off. I can't deal with this right now," she said, her voice breaking. "I need time to think. Ryan, don't bother coming home. I'll have your things packed and left with your brother," she added before ending the call, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. I closed the laptop and turned to Olivia and Ryan. "I hope you're both proud of yourselves," I said quietly. "You've not only destroyed our marriages but hurt innocent people in the process." Olivia looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "Ethan, please," she begged. "Don't tell anyone at the school. We'll lose our jobs. Our reputations will be ruined." Ryan nodded frantically. "We'll do anything. Just please don't expose us at work." I considered this for a moment before nodding slowly. "All right," I said. "I won't say anything at the school, but in return, I want you both to sign confession statements admitting to the affair. It's only fair that I have some insurance." At this apparent reprieve, Olivia and Ryan quickly agreed. Emily produced the pre-prepared statements, and they signed without hesitation. "Thank you, Ethan," Olivia said, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I know we can work this out somehow." I didn't respond. I simply collected the signed statements and left the room, with Emily following closely behind. That evening, I suggested we all have dinner together in the resort's main restaurant. Olivia and Ryan were hesitant, but I insisted it would be a good opportunity to discuss how we would move forward. The restaurant was crowded, filled with chattering vacationers enjoying their meals. Emily and I were seated at a table near the center of the room, an uncomfortable silence hanging over us as the waiter took our drink orders. I casually pulled out my phone. "You don't mind if I check my messages, do you?" I asked innocently. "I want to make sure everything's okay back home." Olivia and Ryan shook their heads, relief evident on their faces. At the break in tension, I tapped at my phone for a moment before setting it on the table. I had set up the live stream to the school's social media account. The phone's camera was now broadcasting our conversation to hundreds of students, parents, and faculty members. "So, let's talk about this affair of yours. How long has it been going on?" I said, my voice carrying clearly in the busy restaurant. Olivia nearly choked on her water. "Ethan, please," she hissed. "Not here." "Why not?" I replied, my voice still calm but loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. "I think it's time we got everything out in the open, don't you?" Ryan leaned forward, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "Miller, I'm warning you, warning me." I interrupted, "That's rich coming from the man who's been sleeping with my wife. Tell me, Ryan, how does it feel to betray not only your own wife but also a colleague?" People at nearby tables were openly staring. Olivia buried her face in her hands, while Ryan looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. "Please, Ethan," Olivia begged. "We said we were sorry. We promised we'd end it. What more do you want from us?" I leaned back in my chair, a small satisfied smile playing at the corners of my mouth. "I want the truth, Olivia. I want you to admit right here and now exactly what you've done." "Fine," Olivia snapped, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, we had an affair. Yes, we lied about the conference to come here together. Are you happy now?" "Ecstatic," I replied dryly. "And what about you, Ryan? Anything you'd like to add?" Ryan glared at me, his jaw clenched. "This is blackmail," he growled. "No," I corrected him. "This is consequences. You both made choices, and now you're facing the results of those choices." As I spoke, Olivia's phone began to buzz incessantly. She pulled it out, her face paling as she saw the flood of notifications. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Ethan, what have you done?" I picked up my own phone, ending the live stream with a tap. "I've done exactly what I said I would do," I replied calmly. "I didn't tell anyone at the school about your affair, they sought it themselves." The reality of the situation crashed down on Olivia and Ryan. Their phones were blowing up with messages from colleagues, students, and parents. The live stream had gone viral within minutes, spreading through the school community like wildfire. You promised," Ryan sputtered, his face a mask of fury and fear. "I promised I wouldn't say anything." I corrected him. "And I didn't. You did all the talking yourselves." Olivia and Ryan scrambled to do damage control, frantically typing out messages and making calls, but the damage was done. Their affair, their lies, their betrayal, it was all out in the open. I calmly sipped my water, watching as their world crumbled around them. Emily placed a hand on my arm in silent support. "I think I've lost my appetite." I stood up. "Enjoy your meal. Oh, and don't worry about the bill, it's on me. Consider it a parting gift for a decade of marriage." With that, Emily and I left the restaurant, leaving Olivia and Ryan to face the consequences of their actions. The next morning, the atmosphere at the resort was thick with tension. News of the scandal had spread beyond the school, reaching the local community back home. Olivia and Ryan were pariahs, avoiding eye contact with other guests and flinching at every ping from their phones. I, on the other hand, remained calm and collected. I had spent the night fielding calls and messages from concerned friends and colleagues, explaining my side of the story with dignity and restraint. As Emily and I enjoyed breakfast on her balcony, Olivia approached me, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "How could you do this to me?" she demanded, her voice hoarse. "You've ruined everything." I took a sip of my coffee, meeting Olivia's gaze steadily. "I didn't ruin anything, Olivia. You did that all on your own when you decided to betray our marriage." Olivia's face contorted with a mix of anger and desperation. "You don't understand. I was unhappy. Ryan made me feel alive again. You were always so focused on your work and your students. Don't you dare try to blame this on me. I interrupted, my calm demeanor cracking slightly. If you were unhappy, you should have talked to me. We could have worked on our marriage instead. You chose to lie, to cheat, to make a fool of me. Emily stood up, placing a hand on my shoulder. I think I'll give you two some privacy, she said softly, retreating into the room. Olivia's eyes followed Emily, a spark of jealousy igniting. Is that why you did this? You're sleeping with her, aren't you? This is all just revenge. I laughed, though there was no humor in it. You really don't get it. Emily is my friend. She's been here to support me through this nightmare you've created. Unlike you, some people actually understand the concept of loyalty. Olivia's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of her. What happens now? What are we going to do? There is no way back anymore, Olivia. You made your choice, and now you get to live with it, I replied firmly. Ryan appeared behind Olivia, his face angry. We need to talk, he said urgently. The school board is calling an emergency meeting next week. They want us all there to explain what happened. Olivia turned to me, her eyes pleading. Ethan, please. You have to help us. If we lose our jobs. I stood up, my expression hardening. I don't have to do anything. You both made your beds, now you can lie in them. I added with a hint of sarcasm, I suppose you've already been doing plenty of that. Ryan's face flushed with anger. You smug bastard, you think you're so much better than us. I didn't flinch. I didn't cheat on my spouse. I didn't lie to everyone I know. So yes, Ryan, I do think I'm better than you. And if you're smart, you'll back off right now. Something in my tone made Ryan hesitate. The physical intimidation that might have worked before seemed to bounce off my newfound confidence. This isn't over, Ryan growled, turning to leave. Oh, I think it is, I called after him. By the way, I've already spoken to my lawyer. He'll be contacting both of you about the divorce proceedings. Olivia gasped. Divorce? No, we can work this out. Please, just give me another chance. I shook my head. There are no more chances, Olivia. You threw away 10 years of marriage for a fling. I deserve better than that. I deserve someone I can trust. Tears streamed down Olivia's face as she made one last attempt. What about all our friends, our colleagues? They'll take sides. It'll be so messy. I replied calmly, I'm not worried. I glanced at my phone, which buzzed with an incoming message. That was Karen from the PTA, I said. She's organizing a support rally for me. Apparently, quite a few parents appreciate how I've handled the situation. They're calling me a role model for integrity. Olivia's face crumpled. This is all going so wrong, she thought. She had never imagined her affair would escalate like this. In her mind, she would have eventually ended things with Ryan, and I would have been none the wiser. Now, her entire life was unraveling. I think you should go, I said quietly. Emily and I have plans for the day, and I'm sure you and Ryan have a lot to discuss. Defeated, Olivia turned to leave the door. She paused, looking back at me with tear-filled eyes. I do love you, you know. I never meant to hurt you like this. I met her gaze, my expression a mixture of pain and resolve. If you loved me, Olivia, you wouldn't have done this. Trust once broken can't be repaired. At least not for me, not in this case. As Olivia left, her shoulders shaking with sobs, Emily emerged from the room. She approached me, concern etched on her face. Are you okay? She asked softly. I took a deep breath, looking out over the beautiful ocean view that now seemed tainted by recent events. No, I admitted, but I will be. Emily squeezed my hand supportively. You handled that incredibly well, Ethan. I'm proud of you. I managed a small smile. Thanks, Emily. I couldn't have done this without you. As we stood there looking out at the horizon, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was pain, certainly, and anger, but also a sense of freedom and new possibilities. For the first time since discovering Olivia's betrayal, I allowed myself to think about the future. It wouldn't be easy, there would be difficult days ahead, the school board meeting, the divorce proceedings, the inevitable gossip and speculation. But I knew I would face it all with the same strength and integrity I'd shown here. Olivia and Ryan had made their choices, now it was time for me to make mine. I chose to move forward, to rebuild my life on my own terms. A week had passed since the confrontational day at the Paradise Resort, but for the residents of Maplewood, it felt like an eternity. The small town of 15,000 was abuzz with gossip, whispered conversations in grocery store aisles and heated debates over coffee at the local diner. The scandal involving two of Maplewood High's teachers had spread like wildfire, leaving no one untouched. At the center of it all was me, Ethan Miller, the ex-husband who exposed his wife's affair in a dramatic live stream that had since become the stuff of local legend. As I drove to the emergency school board meeting, I couldn't help but reflect on the whirlwind of the past week. The parking lot of the Maplewood School District office was packed, a clear indication of the meeting's importance. I spotted Olivia's car and felt a twinge in my chest, a mix of anger, hurt, and something else I couldn't quite name. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself for what was to come. Inside, the tension was palpable. The usually spacious boardroom felt cramped with extra chairs brought in to accommodate the crowd. I nodded politely to a few familiar faces as I made my way to my seat. I caught sight of Olivia and Ryan sitting as far apart as possible, both looking pale and drawn. The board president, a stern-faced woman named Eleanor Simmons, called the meeting to order. "We are here today," she began, her voice cutting through the murmurs, "to address the recent incident involving 3 of our staff members. We will hear from all parties involved before making our decision." I was called to speak first. As I stood, I felt all eyes on me, members of the board, fellow educators, and community members. I stand before you today not as a victim, but as someone who believes in the power of education and the responsibility we have to our students, I began, my voice steady and clear. I detailed my decade of service to Maplewood High, presenting commendations, thank you notes from students, and evidence of various extracurricular programs I'd initiated or supported. Teaching isn't just a job for me, it's a calling. Every day, I strive to inspire my students, to show them the wonders of science and the importance of integrity. As I spoke, I noticed several of my current and former students in the audience. They nodded encouragingly, some even wiping away tears. I won't pretend that the events of the past week haven't been devastating on a personal level, I admitted, my voice catching slightly. But I've always taught my students that character is revealed in how we handle adversity. I chose to face this situation with honesty and dignity, not for my sake, but for theirs. I gestured to the students present. They're watching us. They're learning from us, not just in the classroom, but in how we conduct ourselves in all aspects of our lives. As I concluded my speech, a ripple of applause spread through the room. Eleanor Simmons had to call for order before inviting Olivia to speak next. Olivia approached the podium, her usual confidence noticeably absent. She glanced at me, then quickly looked away, unable to meet my steady gaze. I know what I did was wrong," Olivia began, her voice barely above a whisper. The microphone squeaked, causing her to flinch. She took a moment to compose herself before continuing. "I made a terrible mistake, but I'm an excellent teacher. My students love me, and my art program has brought recognition to the school. Surely, my personal life shouldn't affect my professional standing." Her plea was met with stony silence. I could see the board members exchanging glances, their expressions unreadable. Ryan was the last to speak. He approached the podium with a swagger that seemed out of place given the circumstances. "Look," he said, leaning into the microphone, "what happened between Olivia and me was consensual. It was a mistake, sure, but it's not like we committed a crime. I've been nothing but an asset to this school since I arrived. The art program has never been stronger." As Ryan continued to downplay his role in the affair, I noticed Olivia's expression darkening. It was clear that Ryan's attempt to distance himself from the situation was not sitting well with her. After the 3 had spoken, Eleanor Simmons called for a brief recess while the board deliberated. The tension in the room was unbearable as everyone waited for the decision. When the board members returned, their faces were grim. Eleanor cleared her throat before addressing the room. After careful consideration, the board has reached a decision. Mr. Miller, in light of your exemplary record and the professionalism you've displayed throughout this difficult situation, we see no reason to take any action against you. You will retain your position at Maplewood High. A smattering of applause broke out, quickly silenced by Eleanor's raised hand. As for Mrs. Miller and Mr. Jenkins, she continued, her tone noticeably cooler, your actions have brought disrepute to this institution and violated the trust placed in you as educators. You are both placed on administrative leave, effective immediately. Pending further investigation, it is likely that you will be transferred to different districts. The room erupted in a cacophony of voices. Olivia burst into tears while Ryan slammed his fist on the table in front of him. I, however, remained calm, accepting the decision with a quiet nod. As the meeting adjourned, I found myself surrounded by well-wishers. Parents patted me on the back, colleagues expressed their support, and students shared stories of how I had positively impacted their lives. One student, a shy girl named Emily, approached me with tears in her eyes. Mr. Miller, she said, her voice trembling, I just wanted you to know that you're the reason I want to become a scientist. You showed me that I could do anything if I put my mind to it. I felt a lump form in my throat. This, I realized, was why I became a teacher in the first place, not for recognition or accolades, but for moments like these. As I left the building, I noticed a group of parents huddled together, speaking animatedly about organizing a rally in my support. The news of the school board's decision spread quickly through Maplewood. I found myself at the center of a storm of public opinion. But unlike the scandalous whispers that had followed the initial revelation of the affair, the talk now was overwhelmingly positive. The local newspaper ran a feature on me, praising my dedication to education and my dignified handling of the scandal. The article portrayed me as a role model for the community, someone who had faced adversity with grace and integrity. A few days after the board meeting, I was surprised to find a crowd gathered outside Maplewood High as I arrived for work. Parents, students, and community members held signs with messages like, "We stand with Mr. Miller," and "Integrity Matters." Karen Thompson, the PTA president, approached me with a warm smile. "We wanted to show you how much we appreciate you, Ethan," she said, gesturing to the crowd. "You've taught our kids more than just physics, you've shown them what real character looks like." I was overwhelmed by the support as I made my way through the crowd, shaking hands and accepting words of encouragement. I caught sight of Olivia watching from her car across the street. Our eyes met for a brief moment before she quickly drove away. The contrast between our situations couldn't have been starker. While I was being celebrated, Olivia and Ryan found themselves social pariahs, pointedly uninvited from community events, met with cold shoulders at the grocery store, and subjected to not-so-subtle whispers wherever they went. Olivia, in particular, seemed to be struggling with the fallout. She attempted to volunteer at the local arts center, hoping to regain some community support, but her efforts were met with polite refusals and thinly veiled disdain. Ryan, on the other hand, appeared to be handling the situation with less grace. There were rumors of him getting into a shouting match with a parent at the local coffee shop, and I had overheard some of his students discussing how Mr. Jenkins had become snappish and irritable in his final days before the administrative leave took effect. As for me, I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor. I volunteered to coach the school science team, a role I had always wanted to take on but never found the time for. Under my guidance, the team began to flourish, spending late nights in the lab working with students on their projects. It was during one of these sessions that I received news that would change everything. "Mr. Miller." Zoe, one of my brightest students, exclaimed, bursting into the lab one evening. "We did it, we qualified for the national championship." The room erupted in cheers. I felt a surge of pride as I looked at my team's beaming faces. This was the first time in the school's history that they had made it to the national level. As the excitement died down and the students began to pack up for the night, I found myself alone in the lab. I sat at my desk, a mix of emotions washing over me, pride in my students' accomplishments, yes, but also a bittersweet realization that this chapter of my life was coming to an end. For weeks now, I had been contemplating a change. The offer had come out of the blue, a prestigious teaching position at a magnet school for science and technology in another state. At first, I had dismissed the idea. Maplewood was my home, my community. But as the days passed and the weight of recent events settled on me, the idea began to take root. The next day, I scheduled a meeting with Principal Rogers to discuss my decision. The older man listened intently as I explained my reasoning, nodding in understanding. "We'll be sorry to lose you, Ethan," Principal Rogers said, leaning back in his chair. "But I understand sometimes a fresh start is what we need. You've done great things here, and I have no doubt you'll continue to do so wherever you go." With my decision made, things moved quickly. I threw myself into preparing my students for the national championship while also making arrangements for my move. The news of my impending departure spread through the school and the town, met with a mix of sadness and well wishes. 3 months after the confrontational day at the Paradise Resort, I found myself sitting in my lawyer's office, signing the final divorce papers. The process had been surprisingly smooth. Olivia, perhaps out of guilt or a desire to avoid further scandal, had agreed to my terms without much fuss. As I walked out of the office, holding the divorce papers in hand, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was truly over. I was free to move on and start my new life. The evening before my departure, I was packing the last of my belongings when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Olivia standing there, looking small and vulnerable. "Can I come in?" she asked hesitantly. "I need to get the last of my things." I nodded, stepping aside to let her enter. We moved around each other awkwardly, the familiarity of a decade together mingling with the distance that had grown between us. As Olivia gathered her belongings, she kept glancing at me, opening her mouth as if to speak, then thinking better of it. Finally, as she was about to leave, she turned to me. "Ethan," she said, "I know I have no right to ask this, but is there any chance, any at all? I've changed. I swear I still love you." I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in months. I saw the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago, the woman I had built a life with, but I also saw the woman who had lied to me, betrayed me, and mocked me behind my back. "Ethan," I said softly, "I'm sorry, but no. Trust once broken can't be repaired. At least not for me, not in this case." Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes, but she nodded, accepting my decision. As she turned to leave, I stopped her. "Wait," I said, reaching for an envelope on the nearby table. "I wrote this for you. I think it might help provide some closure for both of us." Olivia took the letter with trembling hands. "Thank you, Ethan," she whispered. "I'm so sorry for what I did to you." As she walked away, I felt a chapter of my life truly close. I turned back to my packing, ready to face whatever came next. The next morning dawned bright and clear as I stood on my front porch, taking in the familiar sights of my neighborhood one last time. My car was packed, ready for the long drive to my new home. As I was about to leave, I heard a commotion down the street. To my surprise, I saw a crowd approaching, my students, led by the science team, along with several of my colleagues and community members. They had gathered in front of my house, many holding signs wishing me well. The science team presented me with a scrapbook filled with photos and messages. Colleague after colleague stepped forward to share how I had inspired them or made a difference in their lives. As I looked out at the faces of the people I had lived and worked with for so long, I felt a swell of emotion. This was what teaching was all about, not just imparting knowledge, but touching lives, building connections, and leaving a lasting impact. From the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of Olivia watching from a distance. Our eyes met briefly, a world of unspoken words passing between us, before she turned and walked away. I refocused on the well-wishers before me. After many hugs, handshakes, and promises to keep in touch, I finally got into my car. As I drove away, watching Maplewood recede in my rearview mirror, I felt a mix of sadness and excitement for what lay ahead. Miles down the road, I allowed myself a moment to reflect. The past few months had been the most challenging of my life, but I emerged stronger, more sure of myself and my values. I was leaving behind the familiar, but I was driving toward new opportunities, new challenges, and a chance to impact even more young lives. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Whatever the future held, I was ready to face it head-on with the same integrity and passion that had carried me through the storm. Meanwhile, back in Maplewood, Olivia sat alone in her small apartment, surrounded by boxes of her belongings. She held the letter from me in her hands, reading it for what felt like the 100th time. Tears streamed down her face as she absorbed my words, kind but firm, explaining why I could never take her back and wishing her well in her future. She looked up at the photos on her wall, memories of happier times, the life she had thrown away in a moment of weakness. As the reality of her situation truly sank in, Olivia began to understand the full consequences of her actions. She had lost not just her husband, but her home, her job, her friends, and the respect of an entire community. As she sat there surrounded by the remnants of her old life, Olivia realized that her journey of redemption was only beginning. It would be a long, difficult road, but as she folded my letter and placed it carefully in a drawer, she made a silent promise to herself to learn from this experience and become a better person. The sun set on Maplewood, casting long shadows across the town. In one car, a man drove toward a new future filled with hope and possibility. In one small apartment, a woman faced the daunting task of rebuilding her life from the ground up. And in between, the community continued on, forever changed by the unexpected guest of infidelity that had shaken their quiet town to its core.